The NFL is here. We're back. DFS is back. 2022 week 1. Let's ride. Happy week 1, everybody. It is Friday morning. That means it's time for the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I told myself I wouldn't say baseball, and I did it, so that's good. This is the DFS podcast. We'll be talking all things DFS. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongiam. I've been practicing the last name all summer, and I think I've nailed it finally. It only took a full year of me butchering your last name. Ryan, we're back. It's really good to see you. I love doing this podcast with you, so thanks for coming back. How's everything? How's your summer? I know you won a bunch of money in DFS soccer, so I think you've had a pretty darn good summer.
Yeah, likewise, Scott. It's good to be back with you. Had a really good summer. I won the King of the Pitch on DraftKings, which is their big yearly contest.
Awesome.
For 100,000. That was really nice. My biggest score ever. So it's helped make for a really nice summer. And we've been grinding baseball and UFC and soccer and some of the other sports, but it's really nice to get back into football now. I know a lot of people, football is their favorite sport to watch, favorite sport to gamble on. DraftKings has, the biggest contests of any sport, so much money to win this year. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, you and me both. I obviously everybody that knows me knows I'm a pretty big fantasy baseball player, so I've been grinding that. But like a week ago, I started to really get the itch. I'm excited for the 49ers season. I love DFS. I play season long football, so I'm actually driving to Vegas right after we get off. I'm going to go. I'm doing the NFFC primetime draft tomorrow. So my wife and I are driving out there for a night. So I got a lot of season long going on, but football is the one sport where DFS for me is really the part of it I enjoy. I don't play a lot of DFS baseball just because I'm always grinding the season long, and it's hard to kind of root and figure out multiple things. Now I'm doing stuff like that, but football DFS is fun. It's just built for it. It's just 1 week, boom, we get our results and we're done. But week 1 is interesting. Week 1 and like 18 are probably the two that are most unique. 18, it's 18 now, but 18 is like a lot of guys are sitting and we got guys we haven't heard of that are playing. But week 1, we have no info, we have no stats, so we have no results, we have no target share to drop back on. We've just got to, trying to figure out usage from, a lot of guys don't play in the preseason anymore too. Like the Rams last night, none of those guys played in the preseason. And Cam Akers gets 3 carries and doesn't play. Allen Robinson gets 2 targets. It's like, oh my gosh, without the preseason, we just don't have any stats. We don't have any usage. Salaries on DraftKings and FanDuel were set like a month ago. So we don't have a lot of huge injuries that really make guys obvious plays, but there's obviously some mispricing. There's some stuff here. How do you attack week 1 as compared to all the other weeks when we're like, oh, well, we see all these stats, we see what's happening. How do you deal with week 1? Because it's definitely the toughest week from that angle.
Yeah, I think you just have to embrace the unpredictability. Yeah. I mean, like you said, there's going to be so much stuff like the Cam Akers thing. I mean, you're going to have situations like that, happening in every game basically. And there's I wouldn't say, just obvious plays based on the pricing. You mentioned there's some mispriced players, but I don't think it's too obvious. And yet you still will end up with certain players that become popular, become chalky, and this is the week to fade them because people just don't know as much. And I was looking at a stat about the week 1 contest the last few years on DraftKings, and the average winning lineup for the big contests had a cumulative ownership percentage of 75%. So if you think about that, it's really about 3 chalky guys, and most of those lineups had 3 or 4 single-digit owned players. So, these are players that you might not hear us talk about. You might, listen to other podcasts or read other stuff. You might like a guy and not hear anybody talk about him. Or, those are the guys you want to take chances on in tournaments. Those are the guys that usually win, these contests.
And I think a lot of this week is guys on new teams where they're priced lower, but their roles going to change, or rookies. We'll talk when we get to cheap wide receivers. We have a lot of cheap rookie wide receivers that could be great players. Who knows where the next Randy Moss rookie season is, but a lot of them won't do anything. We had a lot of guys last year where, they just never really flashed, but there's some guys who just take over too. So it's, it's tough to figure out those rookies, but you're right. The opportunities there, they're cheap. There's opportunity with targets. And we'll talk about some in Atlanta, some in Pittsburgh. There might be a lot of opportunities there. So it's a fun week, but it's a difficult week just because you can't lean back on, I watched the game last week, and this guy had 13 targets. They're clearly using him this way. There's not a lot of that breaking it down, but it's always fun. It's good to have it back. Let's look at the slate. We've got 13 games on the slate, so obviously a full slate. We had a game last night. There's a Sunday night game and a Monday night game. Monday night's Denver, Seattle. Sunday night, I believe, is Tampa and Dallas. So some decently big name teams are there, but we got a lot of big name teams playing. We have 9 games on the early slate, 4 in the late. Interesting enough, like 3 of the best games are the late games, and 3 of the higher total games. Like one game over 46 in the morning. There's 3 of 4 in the afternoon. So I think there's gonna have a lot of late hammers going on with lineups. So a lot of those late games are big. A lot of low total games too. I think that might be a reflection. I think we noticed it last year. You and I talked about it. Kind of midpoint in the NFL last year, we realized scoring was down. Those overrunners really came down from the year before. So I think we're seeing that kind of start the year. But a couple of really high total games. We have the Chiefs and the Cardinals. Obviously, a couple of big quarterbacks here with Mahomes and Kyler Murray. A lot of talent on both sides of the ball here. No DeAndre Hopkins, but still the total there is 53.5. Raiders, Chargers, big rivalry game, rematch of Week 18 last year. Total over-under on that one is 52. Either of those games jump out to you as like, oh my God, that's the one I want to stack the whole time, or you're fading either of those games? How do you feel about the two games that are over 50?
Yeah, the Chiefs game does look really good to me. It looked really good to me when I first opened the slate about a month ago. And for a couple reasons, from an X's and O's standpoint, the Chiefs, have one of the top offensive lines in the league, and this Arizona team has one of the worst defensive lines. So it sets up good for Mahomes to just have time for the most part. Yeah. And with Tyreek Hill gone now, his playmakers are all sort of underpriced on DraftKings. Juju Smith-Schuster, new addition. He's only 5,200. He's going to be one of those popular players. Yeah. Travis Kelce, definitely underpriced at 6,600. It wouldn't have been surprising to see him 7,500 or more in this spot. And then you have, Valdez-Scantling and Mecole Hardman under 5K. So there's just a lot of guys. Yeah, you can play any of those KC guys and feel good about it. At least I can. And I don't know, like that's going to be a popular spot, but it's not going to end up being like the chalky spot. Like you mentioned, the ownership's going to be sort of spread around across those 4 games with the highest total, I think. I don't know. I've checked out some other content, and people didn't seem to be as high on the Chiefs as me, which was surprising. They're not the trendy team that they used to be, but this looks like a really good spot. I don't know. What do you think? What jumped out to you?
What jumped out to me is on Tuesday, wherever Mahomes came out and said, yeah, you fantasy football players, good luck picking the right receiver because it's going to be a different guy every week. And you're like, well, great. That's it. He's like, yeah, you better pick right. And I'm, well, thanks, Patrick. That helps a lot. I mean, obviously, you've got Kelce, but like, I don't think we know which receiver is going to be. I mean, you're kind of picking in the dark at this point. I mean, I think that, Hardman's the fast guy that is like Tyreek in terms of the speed. Juju, obviously, was really good 2 or 3 years ago, but does he still have it? And then, MVS, like, can he catch the ball? A-Rod stopped throwing the ball to him because he kept dropping it. But It's just going to be tough, and someone's going to hit on the receiver that is the number one. We just don't know who it is yet. But Raiders, Chargers, I think if anybody's ever listened to this podcast knows the way I feel about Justin Herbert. So I think that game will be popular just because of the fact that everybody's been drafting Herbert all offseason. He's so fun and so popular. But we will get into all those games. A note on the low totals. There's a lot of games that are under 45. I'll fire through them real quickly, but we got Niners-Bears is 40.5. Really good defense on the Niners there, and there could be some weather in that game too. Saints-Falcons is 43. Falcons offense is kind of a question mark there. Steelers-Bengals 44.5. Ravens-Jets 44.5. Jags and Commanders, new team this year, 44. Browns-Panthers 42. Giants-Tennessee 43.5. That's like half the games right there that are totals under 45. With so many games under there, you can't just cross them all off. Are there any games for you that you're like, I'm not playing anybody from this game? I don't really see very much here. Is there anything you're like, yeah, I'm just going to kind of skip this game and move on?
Yeah, there's a couple. I was interested to hear what you have to say about your 49ers in that game that has a 40 total.
I don't know if they're going to run the ball 100 times or if Shanahan has like this offense he's built for Trey Lance that we haven't seen yet. Like, it's a tough thing to figure out because you look at when he was the offensive coordinator in Washington, The year they had Robert Griffin was really good. It kind of did nothing in the preseason. Then they opened up week 1. It was like a completely different offense. Like, oh my God, he knows how to use a mobile quarterback. And it was like, holy crap, this is going to be really impressive and good. And they went to the playoffs that year. Griffin got hurt in the playoffs. So my thought is that he's got a bunch of stuff hidden for Lance that he's going to open up. They didn't want him to run in the preseason. They looked really, really vanilla in the preseason. Of course, George Kittle's probably not going to play, so that takes away a weapon, takes away a blocker, and you're like, oh, well, he's going to keep an extra blocker in then. So I don't know. It's one of those things that it could go a couple ways. I think they're going to run the ball a lot, though, but I think he's going to have some plays written up. As we get into receivers, I'll talk to you about Brandon Ayuk and how much I like him this year. So I think that, my play is probably to sprinkle some things here and there, but not go too heavy until we see what's going to happen, especially with some weather there. But I just like Browns-Panthers was the one for me. Like, aside from Christian McCaffrey, I'm like, I think I'm probably going to watch those two often to see what we got. I think McCaffrey's the only guy there that I was even remotely not crossing off.
Yeah, I'm with you with that game. McCaffrey, we'll get into it when we talk about running backs, but he's probably going to, he'll be a pretty popular cash play, and rightfully so. But other than that, I'm not looking at anyone else in that game either.
Like I love DJ Moore, and anybody's listening to this knows that, but like, I'm going to see what happens with Baker first. There's so many receivers. I mean, I think from a roster build standpoint this week, it seemed to me that you can get cheap at any position if you really want to. We're going to talk about options, but I think you can, if you want to go heavy running back, you can go cheap receivers. If you want to go heavy receivers, you can go cheap running back. You can get really cheap quarterback. You can get really cheap on at tight end too. There's a tight end under 3,000 that I think is playable. There's a quarterback at 5,000 we're going to talk about. So I think a lot of this is roster build this week. I think you can get expensive guys in if you want to. It's just a matter of, which position you want to go cheap at.
Yep, exactly. There's a lot of flexibility, and there's a lot of flexibility, and you're not, punished for, you're not going to be punished for trying to do something against the grain, because there really is no standard construction this week. Like you mentioned, there's cheap plays at every position that could end up being a great play, and then that would be the construction that you would want. So
I think you'll see next week will be the chalk week when guys go off and their prices don't adjust that much. Week 2 is usually the chalk week. But let's get into players. But first, a note from our sponsors at Hoffer. Hoffer proudly brings you fantasy sports in your complete control. Goodbye are the days of salary caps and house-based games. Instead, say hello to simple fan-made custom contests. On Hoffer, you create contests on your own terms. You pick the entry fee, you pick the number of seats, you pick the athletes, you pick the stats, you pick it all. Choose between one of Hoffer's 12 different gameplays, then set the basic contest terms and write the multiple choice questions, which can be as easy as more passing yards, Mahomes or Brady. Let your sports imagination run wild. It's only contests run by fans, for fans on Hoffer. All contests feature live leaderboards to track your progress during the game and full player transparency to see who you are competing against. Unlock a $50 deposit bonus or an additional $10 for each friend you invite. And it's a whole new world in the DFS game, and Hoffer is ahead of the pack. So don't wait. Download Hoffer. That's HOFR, and challenge your friends today. So Ryan, let's take a look first at we'll go one guy at each position that we think is going to be high percentage chalk. We'll call them the boring plays this week. There's not a lot to talk about. They're pretty obvious. You can sprinkle them in. We think they'll be popular. So let's go with the boring plays. Who you got at quarterback you think is going to be really popular this week?
I think the most popular quarterback for cash games is going to be Jalen Hurts.
Bolded on my sheet is number 1.
Yeah, and it's just it's partly because of the price tag. He's cheaper than a bunch of the big names above him and the elite guys above him, and then it's a matchup against Detroit, which looks very good on paper, and Hurts has the rushing upside that we always talked about. I think for cash games, Hurts is the play.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, Detroit struggled stopping the pass in 2021. I mean, I guess the only question is how much will he throw if they get up? But, I think Detroit's going to be, they're going to be tough. I think their team is not going to give up. If you watch the Hard Knocks at all, like I think Dan Campbell, they're ingrained that they're not going to be a team that's going to fade in the second half of games. They're going to keep coming at you, which is a good thing if you have the other side on offense. And, with how much will he throw, like they don't really have a stud running back. So, Hurts is that stud running back, can score on the goal line. I agree with you there. Mine is an interesting one. It's priced really, really low. There's a lot of you can play the expensive quarterbacks, but Daniel Jones in Tennessee is $5,000 on DraftKings. The price seems insane, so insane that people are going to have to be tempted. Like you can do so much at everywhere else. If you go, he's $2,500 less than these like Kyler Murray or some of these guys in the mid range or the higher end of quarterbacks. And now Daniel Jones has a new coach, and it's Brian Daboll, who comes from Buffalo. He's got a healthy Saquon Barkley. The wide receivers look a little sketchy, but there's a lot of guys that are cheap you can pair him with. If you go Daniel Jones and like Kadarius Toney or Wan'Dale Robinson, you can pretty much do anything you want the rest of the position. I think it's going to be a build that people are going to be very intrigued by. I think that Daniel Jones is going to have some ownership this week, and I think he's going to be popular. It's weird to say for Daniel Jones, but it's one of those week one weird things. But at 5,000, I think he's going to get some popularity this week.
Yeah, and it makes sense because like you said, he's so cheap and he runs a bit too. And then they have some of these receivers that people want to take chances on, like Kadarius Toney and this Wan'Dale Robinson. I think they have so many guys. I'd really like for Sterling Shepard to be out. I don't know. Like
I'm sure Sterling's really happy to hear that.
Yeah. So sorry, Sterling, but I see like Kadarius Toney. It looks like he's going to carry some ownership at least early on, and it seems pretty risky to me. I don't know if as chalk. I like Kadarius Toney. I think he has a lot of upside, but if all their receivers are healthy, I don't know. But I don't disagree with you. Like it looks like a great spot. Those price tags are great.
Yeah, you just scroll and you're like, oh, look at all these guys in the 5,000. You're like, oh my God, 5,000 flat for a guy that we know is going to play. We've seen play, has some rushing upside too. I'm not a Daniel Jones fan, but he can run. He's pretty fast. He can score a touchdown on the ground too. I mean, that adds a nice some nice stats in there. But let's go running back. Give me a guy that you think is kind of a boring play this week and will be popular.
I mean, I hate to you give me the easy one, but I guess I got to start with McCaffrey. He projects from a point per dollar standpoint. He projects as the best running back, basically anywhere you look. And, it's because he catches all those passes. And it's also because, we're used to seeing him over 9K, 9,500.
Yep.
The matchup against Cleveland, Cleveland does have a good defense. But I think, the fact that they're starting Jacoby Brissett, will be another little bump to McCaffrey. The home matchup is okay. They're I don't know. The last I saw, it was like a pick 'em. I didn't check the spread today. But yeah, I don't know. It just makes sense. McCaffrey in cash games just makes sense. He's going to be popular, I think, for tournaments. He's a great candidate to fade. And then I'll let you talk about, so there's a lot of running backs sort of in this mid range and quite a few of them that project pretty well. It's hard. It was hard for me to pick one. I'd like to know what you think after McCaffrey, a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, so we'll obviously talk about all those running backs here in a bit, but in terms of the chalk boring play, mine's gonna be way down low at 5,600 as Travis Etienne in Jacksonville, playing against the Commanders. I just think you look at this guy, and it's a weird week. We have week one where actually season long drafts matter. People are like, oh, I took this guy in the second round. I have to play him at 5,600. Like Travis Etienne goes regularly in the third round of any kind of all these high stakes drafts, sometimes late second, sometimes late third, but somewhere in that range, about 30 to 35. 5,600, I think it's a perfect time to use him because we don't know that James Robinson is 100% yet. Like that may be a timeshare at some point, but gotta like Etienne this week. It's a projected to be a close game. Full PPR and DraftKings really helps. Etienne's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. They have a new coach, most importantly. Urban Meyer was an utter disaster last year. It was like maybe the worst NFL coaching job for a season we've ever seen. They get Doug Peterson now, who obviously was very good in Philadelphia. Had some moments of good and bad, but, knows how to run an offense. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be good this year. People forget this is like a can't miss, easy number one, like tank your season kind of guy to get. So I think that, the sketchiness with Meyer last year, how bad it was, blurs that a little bit. Travis Etienne was awesome in college at Clemson before he got hurt last year in Jacksonville. So I think 5,600, I think people that have been drafting all year, it's going to be so easy just to kind of scroll down. You're like, oh, 5,600, I'm going to take that. I think it's going to make him pretty popular this week.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about the Jags. Anyone besides Urban Meyer is an upgrade. And
yeah. Agreed.
And Trevor Lawrence with another year and a new coach. I mean, you'd almost certainly expect this team to get better. And Etienne, the type of running back with home run upside, big play upside. So yeah, it makes sense. And like you mentioned, this might be the week because you don't want him to be sharing with Robinson. But maybe this is the week where Etienne's more of the guy.
Speaking of running backs, we have a joke in the chat. Someone's asking if you think Cam Akers will retire. I don't think he's retired quite yet. But if I
Yeah.
drafted Cam Akers, I'd certainly be concerned about 3 carries and Darrell Henderson getting 13. That was not ideal. Cam Akers 3 carries for 0 yards is a good way to start your season.
Quick question for you, Scott, while we're
Sure.
still at running back.
Yep.
I'm seeing a guy it looks like he's going to be in some people's cash game lineups. He's popping in the projections, and it's a guy who never really does well when he's the chalk. Saquon Barkley, how do you feel about him at Tennessee? All the reports have been promising out of camp. They say they're going to use him a ton. They say they're going to throw him the ball. And we know how talented he is. The price tag's cheap. I'm seeing him pop out as a running back that's going to be one of the more popular ones.
Love him. I had if you could see my sheet here, I have Barkley and ATN. I picked ATN just because I want to pick 2 giants back to back, but I think Barkley's going to be really, really highly owned too. I think 6,100. He's been drafted. I mean, talking about someone that's gotten popular in the offseason. Barkley was like a mid second round, then or early second round. He's a middle first round pick in every draft now. I saw Chris Liss of old RotoWire fame. I took him 7th in his prime time yesterday. So he's actually set his draft so we could get him at 7 because if you go to 9 or 10, he might go before that. So picking up a lot of steam is going to be used a lot. I do think he'll be very popular at 6,100 also. Okay. What about receiver? Give me someone that you think is as you're scrolling down, you're like, that's boring. That's easy. That's gonna be popular. I have 2, but give me your one. So see if you take one of mine.
Yeah, I have a couple. It's hard not to start with Michael Pittman.
That was
5,500. Yeah.
That price jumps off the page, maybe more than any price on this slate.
Yeah, you said it. The price just jumps off the page. He's the number 1 receiver on the Colts. They supposedly have an upgrade at quarterback now in Matt Ryan over Carson Wentz. And, Pittman has a nice floor and also a big ceiling. We see him with huge games all the time. And the matchup, they're big favorites against Houston. So, yeah, I think he'll be a popular cash play, and rightfully so. What about you? I know he was one of yours. Who else?
He was my one that I couldn't believe as I scrolled. I was like, and you talking about it, again, I know that drafts don't matter for what happens week 1, but people that play DFS also play season long. Pittman's been going in the middle of the second round in every draft. Everybody's going to see 5,500 and be like, oh, against Houston, that's easy. So it'd be the people who don't play him are just fading him for game theory. But I think he's going to be on a ton of rosters. My other guy, a guy who I love, a little bit more expensive and a little bit later in drafts, is Amon-Ra St. Brown at 6,100. It's interesting to me because I think he's good for just playing him on his own. The price is 6,100. He was unbelievable to finish the year last year. He had 5 top 10 weeks the last 6 games. We talked about him a ton at the end of the year. We're like, can he do it again? And he just kept doing it again and again. Should be a ton of targets. Again, the Hard Knocks bump a little bit. We've seen him, on Hard Knocks and HBO all offseason. But one of the keys for me, and I think why I think he'll be, boring and his percentage will go up. You talked at the beginning about how many people are going to have Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to be the most popular run back for Eagle stacks. If you play Hurts and Goddard or Hurts and AJ Brown or Hurts and Devontae Smith or even 3 of those, everybody's going to be like, who do I want to come back with? You're going to come back with DeAndre Swift or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Most times people do like to come back with a receiver because you want a back and forth game. So I think St. Brown's percentage just goes up from how many people are going to play Eagle stacks on the comeback. So I think he's going to be very popular, very affordable at 6,100. But Pittman and Brown, St. Brown with the 2 guys are as I was scrolling and kind of building teams, they were the ones that really stuck out to me as these guys are not the right price right now.
Yep, agreed. And just to touch on Detroit, I'm not sure. What do you think of, maybe if people want a less popular run back, what do you think of DJ Chark, one new addition for Detroit?
We're definitely going to talk about him at cheap receivers. I actually like him. If you want to be a little different on St. Brown, maybe save some money and, go with the Eagle stack and the run back. I think DJ Chark as the wide receiver 2 right now. Javonte Williams is not healthy for a while. The rookie they drafted from Alabama who's super talented but not quite ready. I called him Javonte. Jamison Williams, sorry. There is a Javonte Williams, but he's playing Monday night. But Jamison Williams from Alabama, not ready yet, so Chark slides in that number 2 role. People forget, Chark a couple years ago, again, another guy that was lost in the Jacksonville mess last year. Jay Chark was pretty darn good in Jacksonville a few years ago, really popular and was someone that put up a lot of stats. So I think that if you want to get away from the St. Brown Chark, I think that Chark is a good way to do so. Chalk and Chark are way too close of words. What about real quick tight end? I have 2 that jump off the page here, so I'm gonna let you go first again because you can't steal both of mine. Who do you think is kind of a boring guy here that everybody's gonna roster this week?
Yeah, you're making it really easy for me, having me go first.
Yeah.
I briefly mentioned, talking about the Chiefs, but Kelsey's just too cheap here, and he'd be too cheap if they still had Tyreek Hill. You figure without Hill, like, I don't know, I would figure a slight bump to Kelsey's target share at least, and Mahomes already looked to him in the red zone quite often, and you got to figure he'll look to him in the red zone maybe even a little more often. So yeah, it's a really good spot for Kelsey and a really good price tag. So I have to say him. He'll be popular and rightfully so. What about you? Who's the cheap guy you were thinking of?
Appreciate B Vic chiming in with the yo-yo back at you, B Vic. Appreciate you listening. So I have I have like two cheap ones we talk about tight ends, but in terms of popular, boring, obviously Kelsey jumped out to me, but Kyle Pitts at 5,700, I think is going to be very popular. This is someone that has a ton of buzz in the preseason. Atlanta does not have a lot of guys to take targets. They have a new quarterback in Marcus Mariota, but Pitts is 5,700. He's been drafted early third round, late second rounds of the draft. He's very popular. People love him this year. Coming off the one touchdown last year, the positive regression is like the key word you hear anytime anyone talks about Kyle Pitts. So he's a monster. He's going to be super involved this season. He's going to score more touchdowns. I think 5,700 is the lowest price we'll see him all season long.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, he's just so talented. You got to think positive regression, like you said. I guess
he's just a freak athlete.
He is. He really is. I mean, he's more like a receiver,
Yeah. So let's talk about some game stacks. We will get into all these other plays and positions as we get there, but let's talk about your favorite game stacks. We kind of talked about the high total games earlier, and obviously usually these stacks come from the high total games. If as you're sitting down, who is like here's my best lineup, what game stacks are you really going towards? You think you're going to play the most this week?
Okay, so besides the Chiefs, because I'm gonna choose the Chiefs as, I guess, my chalkier stack.
Okay. And while you're saying that, since you're on it, do you have a receiver you're going to go to? Is it Juju? Is it Hardman? I know you talked about Kelsey. You like Kelsey. If you stack Mahomes, are you going just Kelsey? Or you're playing a receiver with him too.
I definitely want to have a receiver with Kelsey on all those teams. Yeah, I'm stacking Mahomes in the hopes that he throws 4 touchdowns. 2 to somebody, 1 to my guy. You could even stack them. They're cheap enough where in the bigger tournaments you could even stack them with another one. We've seen Mahomes throw 5 touchdowns. You could. Do that.
I think the Arizona offense or defense can be bad too.
Me too. Yeah.
And I think the Arizona offense can score enough where this could get. I don't think they can hang with him, but I think you get enough back and forth where the Chiefs could score 40 points, and all of a sudden, then you got stats everywhere. Since we're talking about that stack, I think you thought it was a little bit chalky, but who's your comeback on Arizona then? If you're playing, are you going Marquise Brown? Are you going with James Conner? Like, what do you do as a comeback here?
Okay, so first, I'll answer that receiver question because No, it's fine. It was it's tough in Kansas City. Which one do you pick? About Juju Smith-Schuster, I do like him, and he seems like he's going to be the popular one. But just assuming he's healthy, this is the guy that could be the possession guy. Catch 10 balls, score touchdowns. So I do like Juju, and then Hardman and MVS is sort of take your pick. I guess I lean Hardman because you saw a couple times last year when Tyreek was out, they did try to put him in the Tyreek role. So, he can catch different kind of passes, shorter passes, maybe sort of, run type plays. It feels like they're going to use him in different ways. And then MVS is obviously the deep threat. So yeah, I don't know if I have to pick one, I guess it's Juju. But then as far as a run back, I think, it's all going to depend on Rondale Moore. I saw he popped up as questionable with a hamstring injury.
He's getting an MRI today. I can't imagine he plays.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. And so that's interesting because Rondale Moore was going to be sort of one of the more popular value plays because, he's 4K and Hopkins out. So, with no Hopkins and with no Rondale Moore, I think Brown and even AJ Green, I'd be fine with both of them, honestly.
Wow, the ghost of AJ Green is back.
It's like he has to get targets in this spot, and especially if they're losing. And then I'm glad you mentioned Connor too, because now it's not a spot where I don't know if I'm going to go to this spot, but it's interesting because he's going to be the least popular running back in this range, like the least popular one. And, he had 19 touchdowns last year, and it isn't crazy to think that, Arizona can go up 14-0 and Connor has both the scores. And then, your Chiefs are playing fast and playing from behind. So
that'd be nice if you had a Chiefs stack. I'd love 14-0 down. That'd be sweet.
So yeah, James Conner is definitely the leverage option. But yeah, I prefer the receivers just straight up. But yeah, what about you? Do you have a stack that, I don't know, stands out as your favorite?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Chargers, and I like this game to be a little bit back and forth. Herbert 7,600, so expensive, but and Mahomes is 7,700, so it's kind of like, pick your poison, which one you want to go with. With him though, I really like Mike Williams this year, 6,600. I think we saw a breakout season for Mike Williams. I think this is going to be another step up for Williams. I'm a big Keenan Allen fan, and we talked about a lot. He's 7,000. I'm going to go Williams 1,600. I think Williams has the bigger ceiling, and I'm going with the stack in a DFS tournament. I want that ceiling. And it's interesting because you have options to come back with. I think that Devontae Adams he's the most expensive wide receiver. I don't think he's going to be popular this week. I think that he's just so expensive. He sticks out. I think people just very easily drop down like, I'll just play Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase instead and save 300, save 1,000. I mean, it's 1,000 from Adams to Jamar Chase. It's Debo 7,400. Nobody's gonna have Debo this week. Tyreek Hill 6,800. I think there's just a lot of guys you're like, I'm not gonna pay 81 for Adams, but I want to get Christian McCaffrey in. So I think Adams will be low percent this week, which is nice to run back. But Hunter Renfrow works also. If you want to save some money, he's 5,800. What he was he the wide receiver 10 last year? Like, he had a really good year, really solid. Carr loves throwing to him. It'll be interesting how they mix in Devontae Adams and how this works. I mean, Carr and Devontae Adams obviously went to college together. They're good friends together. There's a story this week. They almost died together on a rafting trip. Like, we talk about Stafford and Cuff having breakfast. Like, you almost die together. Like, what kind of bond is that for target share right there? So I think that we're going to see a lot of peppering Adams, but I think this game just gives you a lot of options. And on that note, I think based on that, you got to think that Austin Eckler among the running backs can be really low percent owned to. I think a lot of people can go to the passing game in here. Everybody's going to see Eckler at 8,200. You're like, well, C-Mac's right there. I think Eckler's sides this week is a really interesting leverage guy too.
Yeah, I think you were spot on with all that. Yeah, Eckler seems like he's going to be single digits. Yeah. And then I think you hit on a great point with Devontae, because Chargers stacks are already tough because Herbert and his receivers are expensive. Yep. They become even more tough if you try to get Devontae Adams in. So it will, it causes people not to want to do that. The thing about this week, though, you have cheap value to do it, to do it without sacrificing too much. So yeah, I mean, everything you said is just perfect. That stack will not be quite as popular as it should be based on the game total and who these players are, just because they're all expensive players in the stack. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would just be like, well, I can't afford Adams, I'll just go to Renfrow. So I think that it's just an easy, if it was Adams and nobody else, you got to force it, but it's so easy to go to Renfrow. I think people just do that. So I think you're right. I think Adams will, I think Adams and Eckler are both in this game expensive, great players that will not be highly rostered. Any interest in this Bengals-Steelers game? Joe Burrow is cheap. Joe Burrow is 6,400. T. Higgins is 6,100. T. Higgins is really good. That's an interesting, cheaper stack. I mean, that saves that 1,200, 500. That saves 1,700 from a Herbert Williams stack. I mean, that's a lot of money just to go down to Burrow Higgins. Chase is 7,100. Same price essentially as Keenan Allen. So we talk about stacks. You look at Kansas City, Burrow's 1,300 less than Mahomes. Higgins is cheaper than Kelsey. You can save some money here. I know, it's Pittsburgh defense. Pittsburgh defense is supposed to be pretty good. Bounce back for them. They did make the playoffs last year, but they were kind of a mess at a bunch of times. You can come back with an expensive guy in Deontay Johnson. You come back with a cheap guy in George Pickens. Any interest in the Steelers Bengals game?
Yeah, tons of interest. The way you feel about Justin Herbert is pretty much how I feel about Joe Burrow. Nice. I love these Bengals. I think, again, they're only going to get better. And like you mentioned, they're cheap. Burrow is a guy who should be 7K, and that's probably where we're going to see him. And yeah, Chase, he's got a ceiling as high as any receiver in football. Yep. We saw those huge games. We saw huge games from T. Higgins in the playoffs, coming off a big game in the Super Bowl. So yeah, I really like Cincinnati. You mentioned the matchup. The matchup, it's not the greatest, but it keeps people off of Cincy a little. That's all part of it. And, Pittsburgh, it's sorry, I thought I froze for a second. Anyways, they're not the team they once were. So no, I'm not afraid to target them. As far as who I would run it back with, this George Pickens looks really talented from a few things I've seen in the preseason, a few highlights. I know he would have been drafted much higher if he didn't have that ACL injury his final year at Georgia. So, and now that they have Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, it's not a slate where I want to spend salary on any of his pass catchers. So no Deontay for me.
And Deontay might not play too. If he doesn't play, everybody's going to have Pickens at the price.
Oh yeah, if he doesn't play, and then everyone would have obviously, and it'd be hard not to. You'd have to look at Claypool, obviously.
I know
that happens as well.
He's been such a nightmare for me timing him, but yeah, you're going to have to do it.
I know. So yeah, it's just probably not Deontay, but the other guys, I mean, it's a cheap stack. So
we didn't do a show after the Super Bowl, but man, I had every T. Higgins prop in the Super Bowl. That was a beautiful day.
Awesome.
I had touchdown. I had like longest catch. I had yards over. I had everything, and it was that 75-yard touchdown was just a thing of beauty.
Yeah, I actually, funny you mentioned that. I hit a couple single game parlays in that Super Bowl, and T. Higgins was in all of them. That was great. I don't bet much NFL, but I actually bet the Bengals money line all of their playoff games. So it was a nice little run. They were underdogs for 3 of them. Almost took it down in the Super Bowl. But yeah, I love the Bengals. I love Joe Burrow. I think he's going to win Super Bowls. So yeah, I'm on this team.
You must be on the podcast because RotoWire Soccer just weighed in with a "Let's Ride" in the comment section. I love it. Someone got my joke at the beginning of the podcast. So I'm happy to hear that. Welcome,
Scott. What about you? Give me a stack that's like not one of these most popular stacks. Is there any where are you looking in these other games?
There is. So this is like a tournament play. If I'm getting a little spicy, got some multi entries. New Orleans Saints, Jameis Winston, 5,300. Michael Thomas, who the heck knows? But give me some Chris Olave at 4,500. And then you can come back. We talked about Atlanta. They only have 2 guys I'm going to throw the ball to, Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Like, the target share should be huge. Who knows how Mariota plays, but I don't hate Mariota. I think that he's going to be okay there. Drake London, I think I have my wide receiver list down. I think he's 4,500. Kyle Pitts is 5,700. Jameis is not who you want as an NFL quarterback, but as a fantasy quarterback, people forget he forces everything in, and that comes with a lot of interceptions. But fine, that's fine. I'm not rooting for the Saints or betting the Saints. I want Jameis to throw the ball in the tight windows. That year he had 30 interceptions. He also had 30 plus touchdowns. People forget about that. They had some crazy games where they threw the ball a bunch in Tampa Bay, where Evans and Godwin went crazy, and you always figure out which one was which. But he always throws the ball. I just think it's a sneaky stack in terms of you can get expensive everywhere else. You can play Winston, Olave, and either Pitts or London. You can spend anywhere else you want to. You go 5,300 quarterback, 4,500 receiver, and then Pitts and London are both pretty cheap too. You can really get interesting there, and I think it's a way to get really different and not only play McCaffrey, but play McCaffrey with another big running back or with one of the big receivers. You can play McCaffrey and Justin Jefferson. I just think that's a stack that nobody's going to have that I think could get a little interesting, a little spicy.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And like you mentioned, look at the young talent on each side. London, Olave, Pitts. I mean, those are the type of guys you want to take a chance on before everyone's on them. So, like you mentioned Jameis. Yeah, I think no one really wants to roster Jameis, but they forget that if he has some weapons and you let him throw a little bit, he can put up those huge games. Absolutely.
Any other quarterback stacks you want to talk about real quick before we get to running backs and receivers that you're like, this can get really interesting and low percentage? We talked about Trey Lance a little bit. How do you feel about him? He's 6,000. How do you feel about him this week?
Yeah, I think you made some good points when you talked about it briefly. A game with a 40.5 total or whatever it is now, it's usually not one that we're going to target. But, I mean, what's the 49ers total? I don't know, 25 or something similar to these other teams. If they dominate, I don't know, like I'm not going to go there, but I'm just trying to make a case for it. My problem is if they dominate, they're probably going to hand the ball off 100 times in the second half. And I think they're going to play really well on defense, but Lance could run for 80 yards and a touchdown too. And suddenly that floor at 6,000, like everything else, everything he throws for is gravy at that point. So, and I kind of like, if Kittle was out, I almost wouldn't mind that because you would sort of know who to pair Lance with. You know, I mean,
Agreed.
you could pair him with Ayuk or Debo, and that's it. Just move on.
And we talked before at 7,400. I don't think anybody's going to have Debo this week. If you're going to play a receiver, they're going to go with Ayuk, or they're going to go with somebody else in that range. I don't think anybody's playing like Debo by himself. So I think 7,400, he gets he's pretty lowly rostered this week too.
Yeah, I agree. And then there is one other stack. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it, but I do think it could win someone a tournament, and that's Lamar Jackson, just because he could be the slate's highest scoring quarterback. You could see them blowing out the Jets in this spot. We've seen the Ravens do that before, and they have Mark Andrews, who's basically the same price as Travis Kelce, and Kelce's going to be more popular, but we saw monster games from Andrews last year. I mean, so it's not going to shock anyone if Andrews is the top tight end on the slate. So yeah, if and this is a stack where you don't have to run it back with any Jets. Obviously you can, but you could just sort of go for a Ravens blowout and, pair Lamar with someone. I don't mind that.
Yeah, I really like that. I think we might have like chip on the shoulder narrative with Lamar this year too. He's did his deadline of today to sign a new contract. If he doesn't sign, I think you may see a pissed off, okay, you didn't sign me. Here's what I got. I'm going somewhere else kind of season, which we like from fantasy angles. Trevor Lawrence is 5,600. I think this is one that I'm going to watch for a week, but we've said a couple times already. I'm throwing out last year. I'm throwing out the Urban Meyer season. I really like him with Doug Peterson. He is clearly talented, and people forget just how dominant a prospect he was. I mean, he was, like I said, a tank the season kind of guy for. I really want to watch this one. I think he's going to be really interesting. You got Christian Kirk there now. I think it's going to be an interesting mix to see how they look this week against Washington. I think it's probably watch for a week for me, but I actually bet some props on Trevor Lawrence. I have him over 22.5 touchdown passes on the season. I really like that. I think that's a really low number. I know he had 12 last year. Yeah. This season going to be totally different. I actually took him head-to-head, more passing touchdowns against Lamar Jackson too. I love Lamar Jackson, but in terms of like passing touchdowns, I think Lawrence has more this year. So let's talk about some. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, I like that.
Let's talk about some other positions, but first a note from our sponsors at Vivid Seats. Hey, football fans, get your jerseys on and your tailgate snacks ready. That's right, NFL season is back. And so it's your chance to score tickets with Vivid Seats. Download the Vivid Seats app or visit vividseats.com to see your team's schedule, compare tickets, and secure your spot in the stands. As the only ticketing company with a rewards program, Vivid Seats is the winning app for NFL fans just like you. Earn credit when you buy 10 tickets, then cash it in to catch more games all season long. With tickets from Vivid Seats, you go from watching the game to being a part of it. Go to vividseats.com or find us in the App Store to browse unbeatable seats. We'll see you in the stadium. Also, a note from our sponsors at the Blue Wire Network. So, Ryan, expensive running backs. We talked about, we kind of referenced at the top. We talked about McCaffrey being popular, 8,500. We talked about Eckler not being popular. What do you think about the other guys this range? We have a lot of guys that are over 7,000 this week. I know that's kind of a big range, but Jonathan Taylor, we haven't even talked about yet. The number one pick in a lot of drafts. He's 9,100 and at Houston. Really nice game script there. Derrick Henry, nice game script there, 8,600. They're a 6-point favorite against the Giants. Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon. Kamara and Mixon are 76 and 7,100. Nice prices there. There are a lot of playable guys in this range. A lot of times we get bye weeks and primetime games. We have like only 3 expensive running backs to pick from. We've got like 7 this week. Aside from McCaffrey, who I know you like, who else are you considering this week in this range?
Yeah, it's so tough. You can make a case for all these guys.
For sure.
I guess Derrick Henry is who I sort of was thinking about at first, and it's just because he's the same price as McCaffrey and probably going to be McCaffrey might be 4 or 5 times higher owned, so you could get some really good leverage there. It's a pretty good matchup. I don't know. We don't know. The Giants are probably going to be better, but I know they're banged up on the line, and they gave up some really big scores to running backs last year. I don't know. Henry can do it to anybody. So there's nothing that jumped out at me, but he's sort of who I settled on. And it's one of those weeks where I mentioned at the start, like where if you have a I don't know, a lean, or if you really like somebody, I mean, just go with that, because, other people don't know more than you do this week. Anything can happen, basically. Just pick your guy. I don't know who stands out for you. These top guys, I might not go there that much, I guess, is the answer, because I like these 6K guys and maybe some cheaper guys a little bit more.
Yeah, I do too. Henry's interesting because I think we forget just how much they fed him earlier in the year last year before he got hurt, and he was catching passes too. It's just a matter of if Vrabel wants to really lean on him again, or they ease off a little bit because of the fact that he had the injury. And I mean, I think Jonathan Taylor, same thing. Like, I think Taylor will be much less owned than McCaffrey will too, and he's 9,100. But man, Indy has a 27-point implied total. Like, they have one of the bigger implied totals on this whole slate. I know they don't have the biggest total, but they're 8-point favorites against Houston. Houston's not gonna. I'm not worried about Houston really stopping the run. He had 2,000 total yards last year and 20 touchdowns. Like, Jonathan Taylor's an absolute beast. Nice game strip. And I think will be a spot where you can afford him if you get cheap elsewhere. And I think that everybody's going to be like, oh, I'll just play McCaffrey for $600 less. Play McCaffrey while he's healthy is the narrative everywhere. So I do like Taylor a lot too as a way to get a little different. If I'm going cheaper, I think that Kamara and Joe Mixon are both underpriced and both playable. I really like Mixon, 7,100. This should be a nice game script. Pittsburgh, who knows where they are this year, but they could not stop the run last year. They allowed 4.9 yards per carry, which is not a very Pittsburgh thing. You got to think they focused on that, but you still need the players, still got to do it. We talked about how much we like the Cincy passing game. I think Mixon's a way to maybe get a little different there too. He had 1,500 plus total yards and 16 touchdowns last year, and kind of not that loudly either. He's kind of everybody talks about Burrow and Chase and Higgins, but Joe Mixon was really good last year. I think 7,100 is just too cheap, so I'm going to try and find a way to get him in some lineups too.
Yeah, I really like Joe Mixon. Yeah, I totally agree. In this same matchup last year, he had 32 touches against the Steelers. I think he rushed for 165 yards. So yeah, that defense is notoriously better against the pass, and the Bengals destroyed them on the ground last year.
Yeah. And we've got a week. It's a weird week where there's not a lot of huge favorites. Like, Cincinnati is one of the bigger favorites. It's a weird survivor week if you play elimination or survivor. Like, there's no obvious 12 point home favorite. Like, take them. There's 10 home underdogs this week, which is wild. A lot of the really good teams are on the road to start the season. You mentioned mid-range running back. Let's go let's call it 5,000 to 7,000. You can stick Damian Pierce in there at 4,800 if you want to go really cheap. But you mentioned you like some guys in this range. Who are you considering as your strongest plays in this range?
Yeah, you can make good cases for a lot of these guys. So I do like Barkley, like you spoke about, and like we mentioned before. But I really like Aaron Jones. Okay. I think that he's not going to be quite as popular as he probably should be.
I think I'll go farther to say I think he'll be not popular this week.
Okay, and I think that without Davante Adams and with Rodgers having these rookie wide receivers, a banged up Allen Lazard, I mean, I see lots of catches for Aaron Jones here. So yeah, that's where I'm going to take a shot. I think Aaron Jones is going to catch a lot of passes this year, and I think people are going to start to play him more. And I want to sort of be on him first if I'm right. I think they're going to use the running backs a lot in this matchup against the Vikings.
I really like that, and I think he's going to be overlooked for two reasons. One is DeAndre Swift is 6,800. I think people like DeAndre Swift, and Barkley 6,100. A lot of people are going to play Barkley, so I think he gets lost in that mix. But I think like I say, it's draft season. Everybody loves AJ Dillon in drafts too. So I think you've got if you're going to be like, oh, Jones 6,700, why am I going to play a guy 6,700 that's going to be splitting times in the backfield? But I think your point about catching passes is the key there. If they kind of use him as we're inside the 10 and I can't throw to Devontae, maybe I'll just kick it out to Aaron Jones. We know that Rodgers is going to want his touchdown passes. We know that he audibles off of runs to passes in the red zone. He loves to get his stats. I think the pass catching, especially in a full point PPR, that's a really good point with Jones. I like that, and I think that's a guy who will not be chalky this week at all.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Jones, he caught 61 balls last year. He caught 6 touchdowns. He runs all kinds of routes, and that was all with Davante Adams. So I don't know. I for sure see a bump in his receiving this year.
Yeah, I like that.
I think Dillon is playable in tournaments too. just because he's cheap. He's got a lot of touchdown upside, and even he's going to catch some more passes. They were using him in the passing game last year a little bit too.
He's 5,300, right?
Yeah. What about you, Scott? Give me somebody else. We mentioned Etienne. We mentioned Barkley. Who else do you like in this range?
I'm going to go. So why I'm not probably playing the 49ers receivers is I do like Eli Mitchell this week at 5,400. I think it's going to be, I think Shanahan wants to run the ball this week. I think he wants to get a lead. I think he wants to let Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead eat on defense and run the ball. Eli Mitchell's 5,400. I get that he was injured in the preseason. I get that he's injury prone, but this is not season long. We only need him for 1 week here. When he was healthy last year, he averaged 20 plus touches. They leaned on him when he was healthy. Maybe that's why he got hurt. Maybe they won't do it. But I know everybody's like, oh, they got so many running backs. Yeah, but like they have Jeff Wilson and Jordan Mason and Ty Davis Price. None of those guys are like, oh, they've got to get them 10 touches. I think Eli's going to touch the ball. I really like the fact that he has a running quarterback. Like you have to play the run with Trey. Like when they go run option, you have to designate a defensive end or a linebacker to make sure that Trey doesn't run the ball in the end for 50 yards. It just opens up spots for Mitchell. We've seen it with Lamar Jackson with his running backs. Like even Mark Ingram was good with Lamar Jackson because there's just holes there. There's just spots when you have to designate a spy or a player to the quarterback. It just is one less guy that can tackle the running back. I think it's big. 5,400. There's gonna be a lot of weeks I'm gonna want to play Eli Mitchell until he gets hurt. But in DFS, give me that salary. Give me 1 week at a time. If he gets hurt mid-game, that's a week that I'll get burned. But where season long, I get that concern. In DFS, I think he's a perfect play at 5,400. I think he's going to be less rostered than Etienne, right there at the same price. And I think it's a really good spot for Mitchell in a game where the Niners want to run the hell out of the ball.
Yep, I agree 100%. Actually, it's a really good spot. Just to piggyback just a little bit, that game might have the biggest mismatch in the trenches of all the games. You have the Niners defensive line, which is great, against the Bears offensive line, which might be the worst in football, one of the worst in football. So yeah, you could see a blowout here, and you could see Mitchell with 3 touchdowns and like a 28-10 game or something. Yep. Yeah, really like that call.
Last guy I wanted to ask you about this range, and he just seems so underpriced, but I'm worried coming off he's got the injury in the preseason. Najee Harris is a first-round pick in every draft. He's $6,400 this week at Cincinnati. Game script is bad. They're underdogs. He has the injury, but man, they leaned on him in such a big way last year. He caught passes. Granted, Big Ben can only throw the ball 5 yards, so that helped to throw the ball to running back. Any Najee Harris love at 6,400. The price seems really low, but I'm just not someone that I'm on right now.
Yeah, the price seems nice, but I'm with you. I'm on all these other guys that we just talked about. The Steelers' offensive line is probably going to be pretty bad again. Yeah, it's just not somewhere I'm going to go. You can't play everyone. You got to make some cuts. There's one guy that I wanted to ask you about, though.
Do it.
It was a guy that I was thinking about taking a chance on, but it seems risky, and it's this Dameon Pierce, who was named the starter for the Texans. Do you have any thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I mean, he's 4,800. He's really cheap. The game script's a little scary. Indy's one of the bigger favorites on the board, but he's popular in drafts. He's looked great in the preseason. Like you talk about preseason clips, and they mean nothing on Twitter, but like the dude looks like he has some burst to him. Obviously an interesting player. I think that he's going to be pretty popular. Like if people go with a really cheap running back at 4,800, he's going to be the guy. With that in mind, I would pivot the other way. I'd actually go Chase Edmonds instead at 5,200. I'm a little worried about how carries are split in this backfield with him and Mostert, but he's 5,200 in a game that I think they're going to win. I think New England's going to be bad this season. They're an underplay for me in total wins. He's 5,200. I think they're going to be up in this game. I think they're going to beat New England this weekend. So if I'm going to go uber cheap and I'm going to go down here, I'm actually going to go Edmonds over Pierce, but I think Pierce will be definitely more popular.
Yeah, I agree. I agree about New England. They're an underplay for me as well. I like the Dolphins in that spot.
I do too. So let's talk about receivers, but first a note from our sponsors at Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, we've got plenty of that also. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL, like RotoWire, RWNFL to get your first deposit match instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. So as we've talked about stacks and stuff, Ryan, we've talked about most of the expensive receivers, but the guy we haven't talked about very much is maybe the best receiver in football. Justin Jefferson is $7,800 this week against Green Bay. He did have a 170-yard, 2-touchdown game against Green Bay last year in Week 11, but no Jair Alexander in that game. Jair Alexander will be playing this game. One of the top, I'll just call it top 3 or 4 cornerbacks in the entire league. Adams is 8,100. Jamar Chase, we talked about 7,100. Debo 7,400. There's not a lot of receivers in this range. If you had to pick one to play this week, if you want to go up somewhere, where would it be?
I'm going to say Chase. Can I say Chase?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a 7,100. Okay. I think I mean, 1,000 less than Adams. Like, I go to Chase every time.
Yeah. So about Jefferson, I love Jefferson just as a player. Obviously, I think we all do. Great player, huge ceiling. And as far as the price, I think for the most part, we're going to see him over 8K this year. But it's probably just a spot that I'm going to be under on this week. I'm a Packer fan. I like Jair Alexander,
I'm not a Packer fan. Jair Alexander is really, really good.
Yeah, and Jefferson's going to be popular. So, I know he's a good play. I know he could have a huge game, but I'll probably just go elsewhere. What about you? Who's your favorite expensive receiver?
My favorite expensive receiver is probably Chase, but probably to go in the mid-range a little bit. I really like a lot of guys in the 6,000s, the 5,000s. If I'm going to play anybody up here, the guy who's interesting to me, and I think nobody's going to have him, is Debo. And I think if Kittle doesn't play, that Debo becomes really interesting. I don't think Kittle's going to play, by the way. That groin injury, I think he got it on Monday, didn't practice Wednesday, Thursday. We'll get some more injury reports this morning. We're doing this on Friday morning, so we don't know if he's in practice today. But I just think that I think he's not going to play. It's week 1. I don't think there's any reason to risk it. I think that Kyle Shanahan thinks they can beat Chicago without him. He'd rather have him on the field. Of course, he's very important to the offense, but I just don't think you risk him in a game like this, especially with maybe a wet field. So, yeah, I think Chase is my favorite in the range. At 7,100, I think he's underpriced. But we talked about him, but let's talk about some of these cheaper guys. Let's go with the 6,000s first. We talked about T. Higgins earlier, 6,100. I think that we both really like T. Higgins. Who else do you like in the 6,000 range? There's a lot of guys in this range that are going to do well early on and be in the 7,000s. There's a chance to get them now. Is there anybody like that you want to kind of get on now before the price gets up?
Yeah.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, okay, go first. Yeah.
Because I love AJ Brown. He's 6,400. We talked about Jalen Hurts earlier as being the chalky play. I was like, well, I looked at him like, well, I'm gonna have to play him with Brown. I'm sure he'll be like 7,000 and 6,400. Like, I love AJ Brown as a player. The only concern is, how much will they pass? We don't know how that's going to work, but by all accounts, the reports, him and Hurts get along well. They have good chemistry in training camp. He probably has a lower floor than maybe some guys in this range, but I think he has the highest ceiling in this range. I like his ceiling more than Jalen Waddle and Brandon Cooks and Terry McLaurin and Marquise Brown. Like, Marquise Brown's interesting with the other guys hurt, but I think in the 6,000 range, I think AJ Brown is the guy that could score 2 touchdowns and have 135 yards more than the other guys. I love the ceiling here. I think he's underpriced. I think he's going to have some big games this year. It'd be, like I said, the floor is probably a little bit lower target-wise than the other guys, but man, the upside's huge. I love AJ Brown this week at 6,400.
Yeah, me too. Probably the guy I would have chosen. Just so talented.
I'm glad I went first, and I stole him from you.
Yeah, hopefully Hurts can get him the ball. Anyways, yeah, I like Higgins. We mentioned that.
Love Higgins too.
Marquise Brown is a guy that I wasn't going to play. But if Rondale Moore is out, he just makes sense in my Chiefs stacks. So I would go to Marquise Brown. One guy I wanted to ask you about just in general, it can be for this week. It can be, how do you feel about the season? But, what's up with Tyreek Hill? New team, Tyreek Hill in Miami now, one of the most explosive players in the league over the past few seasons. I mean, what's going to happen in Miami this year?
Under 7,000 this week too. He's 6,800. And that's a good point. Like, the reason I don't really want to play expensive receivers, there's like 5 guys in the 6,000s that I like. I mean, we talked about AJ Brown. We talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown earlier. Mike Williams, I love this week too. That's and T. Higgins. That's 4 guys in the 6,000. So Tyreek's interesting to me. I think Miami's going to win that game, but I kind of want to see this offense for a week first. I want to see. I wonder if Tua's actually going to underthrow him on some deep balls. It's going to be frustrating and that should have been a touchdown. We've seen that in camp. We saw that in some clips that Miami's put out. But 6,800, I wouldn't begrudge anybody for playing him. It's just that I like Williams, Brown, Higgins, Williams, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, AJ Brown, and Higgins in this range. Like there's 3 Browns in this range, but I'm going to be mixing and matching my lineups with these guys in the 6,000. There are 4 receivers I really like this week, so I just probably won't get to Hill. Not that I don't like him, it's just that I like other guys more in the range.
Yeah, me too.
What about the 5,000s? We've got, we talked about Hunter Renfrow earlier. We talked about Drake London earlier. He's 5,000. We talked about Ayuk a little bit. He's 5,200. Is there anybody else in the 5,000 range you like? There's a guy that I do really like in here, but I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Yeah, there are a couple guys. Well, one, I'm on the Juju Smith-Schuster train. I already said that. Besides him, I like Christian Kirk. I don't know about this week, like you said, but yeah, top target for Trevor Lawrence now. They gave him some big money. I expect him to see a lot of targets this season and catch some touchdowns. And yeah, I don't know. Kirk looks good to me. I didn't want to say Brandon Ayuk because I thought you might, but I don't know. Who are you thinking in this range?
So I do like Ayuk. I think the key with Ayuk is you're going to have to – we play him. There's going to be some weeks where it's not a lot. They're going to run the ball a lot. But, man, with Trey Lance's arm and ability to get out of the pocket, I think what I've seen so far with Trey is that when he gets out of the pocket, it's not like go and run. It's to get out of the pocket to throw, which I really like. Like you see the really good running quarterbacks, like the first thing they do when they get out of the pocket is look to see if someone's broken open, and then they take off after that. Maybe someone like Lamar takes off because he can be a 40-yard run, but someone like Mahomes or Allen, like they get out of the pocket and they throw it deep. We saw it last night with Allen. Like he got out of the pocket and hit Diggs deep on that bait. I think Lance is, obviously I'm not comparing Lance to those guys at all yet, but he does that in terms of he gets out of the pocket and he looks for someone. I think Ayuk is going to be that guy that's going to be breaking out deep. Debo's going to be, the intermediate guy breaking tackles. Same with Kittle when he plays. Ayuk's going to be that guy that sneaks deep. And I think you're going to get big plays. You're going to have some weeks that are bust too, but you're going to get some big boom weeks. So 5,200, I think that's very playable. The other guy I love in this range at 5,300, right above him, is Rashad Bateman with Lamar. He's playing in the Jets. Bateman's the clear wide receiver 1. I know they have Mark Andrews, so he's probably not target 1, but he's target 2. Hollywood Brown had a 25% target share last year. Like that is gone. Like, that's a big gap they're gonna have to fill out. You can't double him. You've got Andrews there. Someone's got to play the Lamar run. I think Bateman's gonna have one-on-one coverage all season long. 5,300, I think, is the lowest we're going to see him. I think he's going to have some really big games. I like him as a player. He's obviously really talented. When he came up, when he got drafted, everybody loved him. It was a little bit bumpy, but I think now we're there. The second half was better last year. 5,200, I think, is just an underprice for a guy who's going to see a lot of targets from a good quarterback, who likes to throw the ball down the field. I think Bateman at 5,300 is a really good play this week.
I couldn't agree more. This is exactly what you want for Lamar, like clear cut number 1 target. And there's really no one else behind him, like you mentioned. And Mark Andrews probably actually helps Bateman.
I think so too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there.
Yeah, you have to roll a safety or linebacker to Andrews. You can't. You just leave him on someone one-on-one. I think Bateman just runs free. Like I said, you have to play the run with Baltimore too. So let's get cheap on receivers. Let's get 4,500 and below. This is a range where there are a lot of guys this week. Usually, and I struggle to. We find like 2 or 3 we like, but it's hard to find guys in this range as the season goes along. Guys break out. They get out of this range. They get in the 5,000. They get in the 6,000s. We talked about Kadarius Toney is 4,100. Should be a nice game script. They're underdogs against Tennessee. We talked about George Pickens at 4,100 for the Steelers. If Deontay Johnson does not play, everybody's going to go to George Pickens at 4,100. But who else do you like in this range? Who in the low 4s, the high 3s are you finding yourself wanting to play this week? We've already talked about Toney Pickens, so leave them out. We know their plays. Who else do you like in this range?
I think you could take a shot on Paris Campbell. 3,300 for the number 2 wide receiver in a really good matchup. We mentioned Michael Pittman is going to be, very chalky, and Michael Pittman's a great play for 5,500. Is anybody going to be surprised if Paris Campbell catches a long touchdown for 3,300? I think you can go there if he's going to get 5 or so targets for that price.
Can you talk to me about the Packers receivers? You're a Packers fan.
Yeah.
Romeo Dubs is 3,000. Christian Watson is more expensive. He's like 5,000, right? What are you thinking for the Green Bay receivers since you're the Packers fan?
Okay, yeah, very good question. Well, first of all, the Allen Lazard news is huge, at least for me. If Lazard is out, I'll be willing to take a chance on these guys. The rookies for sure, Watson or Romeo. But, if Lazard plays, I see this as, and I think it's going to happen quite often, at least early on, where Rodgers is just going to spread it around. I don't know if I'm confident in the, I don't have a guy that stands out as a guy I think is going to see 10 targets or is going to catch 7 or 8 balls. If Lazard is out, I'll definitely be willing to gamble on some of the other guys just because, one of them will have to do it. But if they're all in there, it's tough for me to pick. I might go somewhere else. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
So let's say Lazard doesn't play, and then you're like, well, someone's got to catch passes. It's Aaron Rodgers. He's the back-to-back MVP. They're going to throw the ball. I think you just go Dubs because he's 3,000. Like, I think even Watson's 5,100. Watkins is 4,700. Like, if Lazard's out, I think I just go with the min price guy and just play it that way. And with the thought that I don't know who he's going to throw to, I can't figure it out, but he's going to throw. Like, give me the guy who's 2,000 cheaper than anybody else. I'll use that money elsewhere.
Yep. Nope. Me too. That's exactly what I would do. And because he's 3K, you don't need him to do like as much as you would need. Watkins or Watson or Sammy Watkins to do. Yeah. That's just one long touchdown. So yeah, I agree with you. One more guy in this range. This rookie for Washington, Jahan Dotson for 3,400. He seems like you could gamble on him. He seems talented, and they don't have. He's running alongside Terry McLaurin. I don't know. Seems okay. Matchup against Jacksonville is okay.
Yeah, it's a really fun range with the rookies. You've got Wan'Dale Robinson is 3,000, Dubs is 3,000, Dotson's 3,400. You just mentioned him. Sky Moore in Kansas City, another guy in that mix is 3,800. Alec Pierce in Indy's 3,900. Like, we're going to see guys in this range that are going to break out these first 4 weeks and going to be in the 4,000 or 5,000s. But it's hard to know with these rookies who's going to really step up. We talked about Pickens also. The other guy I like in here is Josh Palmer in the Chargers. If you're going to play a Chargers stack and you want to go maybe one of the pricey receivers, Allen or Williams, I think you can go Josh Palmer at 3,800 for just a cheap part of this game. You probably need him to catch a big touchdown, a long touchdown, but he's the clear wide receiver 3 in Los Angeles, and you've got he's tied together with an elite quarterback. And whenever I can get a cheap guy down here who's tied with an elite quarterback, it's always a play that I like to make. And 3,800, I think is very workable. If you want to get a cheap part of the stack and you want to not go Williams and Allen, I think you go Williams and Williams or Allen and Palmer and get pretty interesting too.
Yep, I like that.
What about tight ends? We've kind of hit them all as we've gone along here. We talked about Adams. We talked about Kelsey being popular. We talked about Kyle Pitts. Is there anybody else here? Yeah. I've got a couple of cheap guys I want to talk about, but we've talked about the expensive guys, but what about the cheap guys?
Okay, yeah. So I'm anxious to hear who your guy is under 3K. As far as just above 3K. I'm hearing some talk about Irv Smith, and it makes sense. Now that he's healthy and he's like the number 1 guy now, very cheap, new coach, new offense. So Irv Smith makes some sense, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
So I think that makes sense. I think you've got a couple of guys in the 4,000 range too that are interesting. You've got Dallas Goedert and TJ Hawkinson, who are really good players. If you wanted to pair Hurts with somebody and you want to go AJ Brown or Devontae Smith, you could go with Dallas Goedert. I just think it's going to be hard in this range because I think that I don't know how much Philly's going to throw, so I don't know how many of their pass catches you want. Cole Kmet is a name that I think is going to be popular this week. I think in terms of the under 4,000 guys, I think probably 3,700. We talked about how the Niners make it up in this game. Like the Bears are going to have to throw. I think Kmet is the second target. You don't really want to be tied too much to the Bears offense, but 3,700, I think it's a nice way to get a cheap piece of a team that's going to be throwing a lot. My guy under 3,000 is in Baltimore, who I think there's a lot of talk that he might be the third target in this offense besides Anderson Bateman is Isaiah Likely. He is $2,500. Has gotten a lot of buzz in the preseason. Like 144 yards and a touchdown or 2 in the preseason. A lot of talk about him. Every time anybody asks him, everybody says, "Oh, he could be the third target," which is like if he's 2,500, like in a third target with Lamar Jackson, like that's who knows when the regular season starts? It might be like, oh, well, we're gonna go with our guys, and he's not gonna play that much. He's the second tight end behind Andrews, but I think you're gonna have a lot of 2 tight end sets. I think they like that anyway. It's a punt play. It has a lot of risk, but I think it has some legit upside, which we rarely talk about with tight ends who are 2,500. So I think if you want to go punt down here, get expensive elsewhere, I think Isaiah Likely, I think he'll have some ownership this week too. I don't think he'll be, I think he's not going to be, I don't know, he's not going to be high but with all the other tight ends, but I think he's going to have some ownership. We usually get 2,500 guys that nobody plays them. I think Isaiah Likely is going to be, on the more popular side for a punt play this week.
That's really interesting. I'm going to think about that one. That Lamar Bateman Likely stack is pretty cheap, actually.
It's cheap, and you leave Andrews out, but you come back with like Elijah Moore on the Jets, or who it's interesting enough. Like we're like, oh, well, Joe Flacco's playing. Joe Flacco was really good with Elijah Moore last year. Elijah Moore was better with Flacco than he was with Zach Wilson. So I'm not sure. Baltimore Jets is like, do I really want to play 100 guys from that game? But I mean, we're talking about a week where there's only two high scoring games. You could play those guys and then get all the expensive guys in the other game if you wanted to. And it's kind of an interesting way to go.
Yep, I agree.
And you get Lamar, who has, like you said earlier, has as much upside as anybody on the whole slate.
Probably won't be that popular.
Yeah. Isaiah Likely, 2,500. There you go.
I like that.
Ryan, we gotta play a defense. It's part of the rules in DraftKings and FanDuel. You gotta play one. I think you and I usually try and find the least bad cheap one is maybe the best way to put it. It's hard to sometimes play expensive defense. Maybe this is a week you could do it this week if you wanted to. We talked about the Niners and the defensive line versus the Bears offensive line. I mean, you got to think that Bosa and Drake Jackson and Armstead, those guys eat pretty well this week, but they're 4,100. They're not cheap. What are you doing on the defensive side this week?
Yeah, I am normally a cheap defense guy. I think paying up for defense, though, is always a pretty good move for tournaments just because people don't like to do it. Yeah. And when your defense scores you 25, it's such big leverage when nobody plays them.
Yep.
From a cash game perspective, the most popular defense is probably going to be the Commanders, 2,500 with a home matchup against Jacksonville. It just makes sense because they're at home and it's it's against Jacksonville.
Yep.
I think, you might not like to hear this, but you could take a chance on the Bears. They're only 2,200.
I don't think that's a crazy play. I mean, we talked about Trey and his upside. Like he clearly is going to have some hiccups and it's going to be a roller coaster. Among teams at 2,200, like he could throw a pick six pretty easily.
Exactly. Like, of course he could throw a pick six. Of course, he runs. So of course he could fumble, for a scoop and score. That type of stuff happens. I don't know. What about you? You had a hot streak with defenses. I remember last year. Are there any ones who sticks out for you?
So if you're going to go expensive, I do like the Niners. I don't think the Bears can block them. I mean, Justin Fields is elusive and he can get out of the pocket, but I think Nick Bosa is going to win Defensive Player of the Year. I think Nick Bosa is going to play dangerously with 20 sacks this year if he stays healthy. I just think he's unbelievably fit right now. I think he's ready to dominate. So I do like that. I think the Colts are interesting too. The Saints are interesting. They're both expensive. So I think there's a lot of choices up there. If I'm going cheap this week and I'm like, I need to save $1,000 here to get someone in, I really like Miami this week. 2,600 home favorites against New England. I'm not a Mac Jones guy. I think that they protected him a lot last year. If Miami gets up in this game and Mac Jones has to throw, I really like the chances of Miami making a big play. I think they're going to get after him. I think they're going to rush the quarterback. I think Miami's defense is a little bit underrated. I think Miami as a team is a little bit underrated. I think a lot rests on Tua and how he plays in this year. But I do like Miami as a team. They always give New England trouble. They always give Belichick trouble. Even when they were the elite Tom Brady years, like Miami always gave them trouble. They play them well. I like Miami. 2,600 would be my cheap one. I think Washington is going to be popular too. I think the Bears are going to get some ownership too. I think going against I'll call Trey a rookie quarterback is going to be at 2,200 is going to be people go to. But if I'm going to go in that range, give me the Dolphins against Mac Jones this week.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't realize how cheap they were. I'll definitely be on some Dolphins too at that price. If anyone wants to get, a little bit more contrarian because of the price tags, never mind targeting like Mitch Trubisky with the Bengals or maybe targeting Jacoby Brissett with the Panthers, defenses that no one's going to play in that range. Look to target bad quarterbacks. At least I think the opening weeks, especially week one, sometimes you might see some ugly football. Sometimes it favors the defense. So just, you can take a chance on any of these defenses that seem like they're in a good spot.
It's a really good strategy point too, because both those teams are stuck in that weird middle range where you're like, why am I going to play them? I'm just going to go up to the Colts or Niners.
Right.
But you're also like,
Right.
why am I going to play this defense? So I can just go down to a team in the 2000s. So
Right.
we always see that like 2,800 to 3,500 range. Like nobody plays those teams unless it's an obvious one. And that's a really good call. I think that, going against Trubisky, going against Jacoby Brissett is probably never a bad thing. Both those teams are home favorites. And we always like that with the defense too. You get up in the game, teams got to force the ball. They got to throw the ball in the second half. And I like those plays. Those are two good ones that I think you're right. Nobody's going to have them.
Awesome.
Anything else on your mind here for week one? I feel like we've kind of hit it pretty well and kind of talked to all the guys we like. And I think if we talk through it, there's a lot of plays that I like more than I thought when I first looked at the slate. Yeah,
no, that was pretty comprehensive. I think I'm excited to gamble and watch some football.
I agree there. You're in Europe. So what time? Like Packers Vikings is the 1 o'clock game for me here. So it's like 8 or 9 o'clock for you then.
Yeah, it's tougher being over here. So the noon games start at 6, and then the Packer game will be 9:30. So not too bad. I've got a babysitter set up for the kid. I'm going to be out all night with friends watching the games.
So are there bars that are like American football oriented where you can go watch games? They're set up for that. There's nobody getting mad because you didn't put tennis or soccer on or something.
Yeah, there is. And I think we're taking it a step further this year. We found a casino that's got every game and a ton of TVs, like a really nice casino, a lot of space where we can have our laptops and just a perfect spot really. So I'm excited.
That's awesome. And I don't want to say you do, but you can bet on games legally there, right? Too.
Absolutely.
That is beautiful. I love it. So that's actually not bad. Packers Vikings starting at 9:30. That's not too bad. It's
going to be fun. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
This afternoon slate is great with Packers, Vikings, Cardinals, Chiefs, and Raiders, Chargers. Like the three best games are all in the afternoon. There's only 4 games that slate, but they're all 3 of those 4 are really good. The morning slate's a little rough, but I think with 9 games and having football, that's all we're going to care about is there's 9 games going on at once. And I'll be watching the Niners game, but that afternoon slate lines up to be really fun.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Beautiful. Well, thanks everybody for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We do appreciate that. We appreciate the people commenting in the chat during. We appreciate anybody watching live. Obviously, if you listen to the audio version, we appreciate that too. If you could please rate and review the podcast, it does help us a lot. People finding the podcast help us a lot there too. You want to follow Ryan on Twitter? He is his name is on the screen there, but he's at Ryan Belongia, which is BELONGIA. I am at Scott Jenstad. I apologize for some of the baseball talk last month of the season. Then I'll be fully football on Twitter, but during the football games on Sunday, I'll be talking football for sure. If you want to ask us any questions, fantasy, DFS, season long, whatever you want to do, we're happy to answer there. If you want to ask any soccer questions, Ryan's the guy to talk to on that one, so we appreciate that. Anyway, everybody, thanks for listening. We'll be back at you every Friday morning throughout the football season. We're very much looking forward to it. Hope everybody has a really good week 1. We're back at you next week. Take care.
Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.